Welcome to Mindshifters Radio. Delighted that you're with us today and that we once more get to enter this conversation about first century Aramaic forgiveness. Good to see all of those names up on the list of people joining us. Welcome, Sally, Susan, Melanie, Wintel. It's a delight to have this opportunity to move forward and say hello and welcome, Jeanie. Delighted that you're here. And I'm thinking that perhaps, Jeannie, you might want to share a little bit about a question that you had uh, been asked about a work situation and your reply, your answer to that inquiry about dealing with a boss and the projections on the boss. Does that fit for you? And I'm going to need to get there. We go. Jeannie has pushed the button. Here we are, sweetie. Delighted that you're here. Not hearing you yet, Jeannie. Try pushing the button once more. I'm going to reset here. Okay, let's try again. There we go. You should be with us, sweetheart. Still not hearing your voice. That's strange. Nope. Hmm. Well, Jeannie, I guess we'll just have to let that go because you're just not coming through. Okay, well, not sure what happened there, but if you're out there in listener land, you have a thought or a question for us, please push that call button and let's see what happens. See if we're permanently disconnected here for today, or whether that's Jeannie's phone is an anomaly. What's happening there? So, if you're out there in listener land and you have a thought for us, a question, an answer, an idea, push one. Push one. No, don't push one. Push the call button. Answer the questions that come up in the window that opens, and then the call button at the bottom of your screen should light up, and then move from gray to active, and you should be able to say hello. In the meantime, I'm going to step back to our conversation about codependence. Might be Jeannie. Well, I just have to see. Well, I'm signed in on my phone, Jeannie, so that shouldn't be the problem. But we'll let it go for now. I'm gonna suggest if you want to really look at some of the dynamics that are going on in the world today, and it doesn't actually get into the codependence issue, but it really does show how the human mind can be totally and completely disconnected from being. That the human mind can be totally based in whatever's stored in carbon based memory with no inkling of human life active in that mind. And the series, we actually just finished watching it last night, is 1820, or pardon me, 1923. It's in the Yellowstone series, the middle Yellowstone series. Let's see, Sally, when I leave the gym, I will test the call button. Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that, Sally. So the series is called 1923. I believe it's on Paramount. if you've got that, and be showing the difference between a mind that is totally disconnected. If we look in the political world today, we see people doing things that are just beyond comprehension, and that's a mind that's just totally, completely disconnected from being. There's no input, no inclination from the state of love, the mind of love in their lives. And there was an interesting scene. There's one of the quote unquote bad guys who's out there, I mean, he's killing people and da da da. And when he watches someone who's disconnected, I just found this really interesting. He watches someone who's in that totally disconnected state, and he realizes he's become disconnected. But he explains, actually, he's talking to his wife. He's benefiting from associating with a man who's in this totally disconnected state, willing to do anything to anybody, kill, steal, anything to gain power or money. And he wants money, so he gets in bed with this guy, basically, goes in business with him. But then as he watches this man who's in this totally disconnected state, he sits with his wife and he's like, I can't do this. Yes, I became evil. I don't, he doesn't use that word, but in essence, he says, I really went off the rails, and I just feel like I've been beaten on for so long and so much. I just had to do something. So I bought into this. But when I watch this man who is truly evil, and remember that in Aramaic, evil is an archery term that means missing the target altogether. He says, when I watch this man, I realize I can't do this. I have some ethics. I have to be able to look my son in the face. And so, though this lifestyle we have entered into is going to give me buku money, we're going to stop. I can't do it. And it was an interesting demonstration of how we lose contact with being and then come back into that state of being. I thought it was interesting, and I don't know. Let's see if Peter's on the show today. Oh, Peter's not here, so I'll save that question for a time when he's on the show. But living as a human being, and one of the profound pieces of this work is when you step into the next level of it. There are times when they're kind of like those peak moments. There are times when you taste being. Peter talked about that the other day, that his second time at Heartland at an intensive and doing a still point session. And he touched the state of being and knew something like profound had happened, though he couldn't hold on to it at that point. And that really has been his inspiration over the last 30 years or so in continuing to do this work. And once you've had that taste, it becomes the beacon, it becomes the guide for your life. And even though you can't hold on to it, perhaps you you get to peek at it, you get to touch it, and then the next piece of work that needs to be done surfaces. And when it surfaces, you have an opportunity to work through the next layer. And Melissa, let's see, long time, delighted. First time listening to one of your live shows in a while, though I've heard you speak in person and listen to your videos regularly. On your first you mentioned something about surgeries. That brought a question. Well, Melissa, let's go for the question. If you want to type that in, we'll see if we can cover it. Or if you want to push one, we can talk about it. I'll wait for your answer there. In any event, one of the things that happens as you do your work, it might happen in the middle of a worksheet, it might happen in the middle of a still point session, when that carbon-based memory system collapses, it drops, and the expression of emotion and sensation in the body from the pain and trauma held in carbon-based memory disappears, and being steps in. When that happens, oftentimes people, when they touch that, of course, it's just wondrous and delightful. But then when they lose it, it's like, oh, well, all is lost. But in fact, what's happening once one has a taste of that state of being, a taste of that level of aliveness that is beyond what the world could even conceive of. Someone in the ancient scriptures spoke of it as the peace that passes all understanding. Like there's no rational, logical way to explain it until you really understand how the mind works. But then something happens in your world that resonates the old trauma-based self, and that trauma-based self comes up and steals that state from you. And it becomes a battle, becomes a challenge between being able to maintain that. Like, where did it go? It was so awesome. Oh, I guess it wasn't real. Oh, it was real, all right. The key is, can you keep it once you touch it? And the only way you can keep it once you touch it, then lose it, is to engage in the tools of freeing yourself of that part of yourself which stole that state from you. Yeshua spoke of it as, in order for you to live, you've got to die. The self that's based in carbon-based memory, the self that's based in the power person dynamic, has to be defeated, has to go. And that's the real work. That's the work of forgiveness, is alleviating oneself of, we might say, the self that isn't but appears to be. And that process is one that is just, I'm not sure the word to use for it. It seems like trickery. It seems like an impossibility. But the key is to recognize that literally everyone, when they're under extreme stress, defaults to their power person behavior. Remember the three behaviors that we've talked about with the power person dynamic. When there's little or no stress, one will do whatever they did to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, the automatic decision system in the mind will kick in, take them out of that personality, take them out of that behavior, and will force them to do what they did to resist and survive with their power person. And then when they become ultra stressed, they'll do what their power person did to them that they hated the most. Unless you're really conscious, unless you've really done your work, that's going to run your life. And it's those unresolved power person dynamics, unresolved power person experiences, unforgiven, that steal that state of being from us. So carbon-based memory, pretending to be the mind, has several pieces of advice that it will give you. We've talked about them as the pseudo solutions. We got about halfway through them, and then we've been processing for a couple of days. So I'm going to go back and just do a quick review of the ones we have covered, and then we'll step into the next series. And of course, this one I talk about all the time because it's such a basic. It's like the number one default state when the power person dynamic is resonated into activity. And that is, if I could just figure this out. What happened? Why did it happen? How did this happen? And my guarantee is you will never figure it out. I don't care what it is. When it comes to interactions, when it comes to, what are the genetic dynamics? What are the life experiences in you that trigger the dynamic in them that had them do what they did to trigger what's going on in you? You'll never figure it out. But at any moment you choose to, you can do your work around it and forgive it. You can remove that dynamic from your mind. Otherwise, you become a non-human thinking. How many people live in their heads? They never allow themselves to touch into what's going on in their bodies. They're always trying to figure it out. And it's like the impossible dream. Can't be done. So that's the number one pseudo solution of the non-being mind. Number two, if I could fight, winning becomes most important. If I were just strong enough, if I could just beat them up, You don't need to be strong, you need to be. But if you buy into that pseudo solution, you become a non human attacking. And then the pseudo solution of number three, if I could just forgive them or myself or the situation. And in that case, if that's the pseudo solution your mind is presenting to you, if that's your mind is saying, oh, this is how we solve it, then you become a non-human fixing, a non-human doing, a non-human pleasing. And someone who's pleasing, doing, fixing, that can be great, but there's no being in that relationship. There's no being present for that person. The fourth pseudo solution of the non-being mind, the mind will counsel you. Here's how you take care of this problem. You just fix yourself or you fix them. And that looks like, if I or they were just good enough, if I or they could just be enough. And remember, one of the basic messages, one of the first messages that most people get from their power person is something to the effect of, you're broken. You're not good enough. You never will be. You'll never make it. And so the mind counsels, well, if I could just be good enough, if I could just fix this, you can't fix it. You can forgive it, you can heal it. And if you stick with that, if you go with that pseudo solution, then you become a non-human pressuring. There's always the pressure on yourself to be better, to do it right, or to beat on someone else. If only, this is the situation where you give somebody their daily dose of disapproval, or you give yourself your daily dose of disapproval, and one becomes a non-human pressuring in order to, pass the message on. If you were just good enough, or doing it to themselves, keeping themselves under that pressure. If I were just good enough. Then the fifth pseudo solution of the non-being mind. Let's see, we've got a comment. Let me take a look here. Okay, Melissa, got it. So let's see. You've helped me. Well, I'm delighted to hear I've helped you in your life more than I could know. I'm delighted to be on your team. That's my purpose. Because, of course, every time I get to help you, I get to support me. I get to break through another piece. So, we're all in this together. Nobody's any different. And question is, one of your videos spoke of surgeries. I've had many in my life, a few major ones. Not stressed over them, or so I think, but I also believe even though they put us under, we experience major trauma. Do I need to do worksheets in this? Can I be causing issues? I'm not sure how to call it. Okay. Well, in order to call in, there's if you're in the app, there's a call button. You push that call button, and when you do, it opens a little window. You have to hit a couple of check boxes. Then it highlights a second call button. When that uh, second button is grayed out when you first open the window, when you answer you do the check boxes, then it highlights a second call button. That's how you call in. But my offering is that the body never forgets anything, even though it's in anesthetic. So, yes, like for instance, scar tissue is basically suppressed trauma. When you can allow yourself to go into the tissue and experience the trauma that's there, hold the trauma in a space of love, process through it, then the scars will tend to disappear. So I would suggest that, and especially the fact that you're guided to ask the question, I would say that your own intuition is telling you there's some work to do around those, what you might call assaults on your body. So that would be my offering. Yes, go for it, do it, and any support we can be, we're here. And those worksheets might look like, you know, um, so I'm thinking about a surgery I had 10 years ago. And as I think about that surgery, let's say I have fear come up. And so my worksheet would be, you know, I, Melissa, who I'm love, am experiencing fear. And I'm concerned as to whether or not this situation, number 1C, might be, I'm concerned as to whether or not I might survive the surgery. Or there might, a variation on the theme might be, or there might be long-term effects. Or will I ever be the same? And then looking at the goal involved, jumping down to number 3, the goal, I'm willing to go through the symptoms. I'm willing to embrace this energy. So the goal might be the goal to be the same or better than I am now. And then, that might be one variation on a theme with that. The other might be, to have uh, total, complete confidence in the doctor that's performing the surgery. So that might be another worksheet, another variation on the theme there. So I hope that helps and gives you some input on how that might be done. And again, if there are questions, put it in the comments or try hitting that call button. Let's have a conversation. Okay, let's go back to the, a minute, we've still got another comment here. Carrie, appreciating the comment on doing worksheets around surgery. One of the things to recognize with this beautiful, powerful, amazing process that Yeshua created 2,000 years ago and handed to us is that you can do the forgiveness process around literally any person, place, thing, or event. You can look at some historical event, you look at, something that happened in the Dark Ages, and you find yourself just going into fear or rage about it. Your mind tells you your fear or rage is about that, but all your mind is doing is projecting that fear or rage into that thing that happened in the Middle Ages. So I can do a worksheet around, the subject of number 1C would be Middle Ages, and, this and that happened, blah, 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 brought up rage in me. What's my goal? See, the Middle Ages, the behavior was so dark. I just, I got to breathe with that one. What is it? I want people to be decent with each other. I want people to function like human beings. That might be what the goal might be to work with in forgiving around something. So any person, place, thing, or event, past, present, future, there may be some projected fear of the future. Then you can do a worksheet on that. And you can do it on anyone, living or dead, including, of course, yourself, the person you look at in the mirror. So that's the beauty of the forgiveness process. Remember that, whatever the situation is, what you're really working with is, in order for there to be pain or upset around any issue that's ever happened in eternity or has ever happened in your life, your mind has to be producing a construct about it, a reality. And every reality that the mind produces is driven by a goal. You remember the Harvard research we talked about. In a time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, measurable units of electrical activity, what they showed in the laboratory was while they're measuring those brain cell firings, they're tapping into the massive information that's moving in the unconscious. And what they came up with was that the max amount of data that could go into the perceptual construct of the moment, into awareness in the time frame where those 10,000 brain cells are firing, is 9 bits of data. Just a little tiny bit is moving in awareness, in conscious awareness. And of course, if out of 10,000 brain cells, your perceptual reality in any given moment is constructed of a maximum of just 9 bits of data out of that 10,000, obviously something has to determine which 9 bits of data your mind's going to use. And if the 9 bits of data that your mind is going to use, which can be connected to 10,000 or perhaps at the deepest level, 10 million, who knows? Something has to select that. Something has to determine which data, and if the data that's being used resonates pain, then recognizing that the driver for that whole process is your goal. Notice you're never upset about anything unless you have a goal for that something. And when you specifically identify the goal that you have, the driver that's causing your mind to use pained content that is unconscious, by canceling the goal. Remember, the word forgive in Aramaic is shabag. It means to cancel. When I cancel my goal, let's say that situation that I alluded to that might have happened in the Middle Ages. When I cancel my goal for people to be decent with each other, then the pained perception that I have when I confront that situation that happened hundreds of years ago, that construct in my mind collapses. And as you might remember, the 9/11 towers dropping down in their own footprint. When you collapse a perceptual construct in your mind, it drops into its own footprint. You remember Carl Jung says, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct our lives and we'll call it fate. So when I cancel a goal, I take a breath, I let that construct collapse, I now drop into my own unconscious, and the unconscious becomes conscious. Now I can become aware, and it always amazes me, over the years, the hundreds of people that I've walked through worksheets, when they'll just cancel a goal, and make sure they're on track with the precise goal that's involved in the situation, and they cancel that goal, the memories they come up with, it's amazing. And so collapsing the surface mind's projections gives you access to the root of those projections. When you go to the root that perhaps has been hidden in your bloodline for 10 generations, you bring the unconscious conscious in the presence of love, and breath, love delivered to the cell by the breath, is the master solvent for trauma. In the same way that this flow of water carved out the Grand Canyon over a period of thousands of years, water is the solvent that dissolved the Grand Canyon. If your pain is a mountain of trauma of some kind, and you collapse into that mountain by canceling the goal, you hold love present. Remember, in step 4, before you go into canceling the goal on the worksheet, you purposely, consciously tap into the strongest presence of love that you can. And then you cancel the goal. And when love is present and the underlying traumatic dynamic is exposed to active present love, bingo, the trauma is dissolved in an instant. It always amazes me how people drop in and what they get in touch with. And then, the most common comments that I get over the years, the next step in the worksheet is, how do you feel? What's going on for you now? And the most common comment I've gotten over the years from people when they do the worksheet process is, geez, I don't even know why this was even a big deal. It's like there's nothing to it. Well, a minute ago, there was something to it. You had all this unconscious trauma held in you. You exposed it to love, and the dissolution of the trauma, it's like, what was the big deal? Well, it's not a big deal once you've dissolved the trauma, and it can be done in just a fraction of a second, in an instant. That trauma can be finished. Sometimes, if there are many underlying factors, you might have to do 2, 10, 100 worksheets to process through all the facets, all the underlying dynamics of that particular trauma. And so, Miss Carrie, how are you, Carrie? How are things in
Good,
Mexico?
good, good, good. Sunny, beautiful, thankful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Joining you in
Um,
that.
huh?
Joining you in that.
Yes. Um, I love the subject that you were talking about the different things that we put in the place of solving um, our power person dynamic. And I heard you say something the other day that as soon as we blame someone or something else, we give away our power. And I thought,
Yes.
man, that is a quotable one. I wrote it down and I've been
Yeah.
repeating it because it's really good.
We literally hide our power in our own unconscious.
Yeah, and it's
Literally,
our
when
power
I
as a
say
creator.
you did this, you're the reason all this is going on in me, I'm literally taking all of my power and putting it, hiding it from myself in my own unconscious, in my brain's projection on you. And so now
Right.
that power isn't accessible to me anymore because I just bought into the belief that it's your power.
And it's my power as a creator, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And by forgiveness, you get to reclaim your power. It's kind of like when
Right.
you play country music backward, you get your dog back, you get your girl back, you get your truck back.
Right.
So you get your power back. Yeah.
So one of the things that I started working on the other day, because it's been coming into my mind, and looking at generational things and how, what maybe the patterns I have that are generational, or kind of searching in my generations for patterns that I could see and then asking myself if I have them. So I did a worksheet on a memory that I have as a pretty small child, probably 5, of my parents yelling at each other in the night when I was in bed. And
Right.
it's interesting because in later years, and they were very harsh voices. And sometimes I'll hear something in life and go, wow, that's kind of that sound of these
Right.
two people sort of screaming at each other. And one of my brothers, probably when we were, I don't know, maybe even 30 or something, he said, yeah, I had these really weird memories of mom and dad like yelling at each other at night when we were in bed. And I said, oh yeah, I remember that too. And I don't have a lot of emotion with it. um Maddox said, my husband, uh, are you still there?
Yep. We're here.
Okay, my phone kind of does this go to sleep thing. So he said, well, there must be some fear with that. And so I put fear in the slot, when I did the worksheet. I don't feel, I think as a child, there was part of me that was sort of matter of fact. I was watching what was going on and I didn't feel a lot of drama inside myself about things. It was like, oh, wow, that's, and I look back and one of the ladies in one of your videos I listened to recently said, in the codependence to interdependence, said, you know, I just do the worksheets, and even if I don't feel a lot of energy with something, I do the worksheet because I know it's going to make a difference. And I sort of feel like I do that sometimes too because I've done a lot of worksheets and I've gone, well, let's explore this. And I think my mom used to have these kind of screaming fits, and it isn't something I feel like I've ever had. I feel like my dad was kind of more my power person, and I adopted his behaviors more. But then I started like looking in my bloodline and going, well, where did this come from? And so I guess I'm asking, how do I explore more deeply what the patterns were in my ancestry and bring them to the surface so that I can clear them. And I think, then when I thought about that with my mom, she was kind of raised by her grandparents, and her grandmother would have a mental breakdown once a year and go to the sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan, and recover for a few weeks and then come
Mm.
back. And I think she might have heard her doing that kind of thing. But anyway, I was just kind of exploring it consciously, but wondering how I can use the worksheets more to an extent of delving into unraveling those patterns that are in there.
Right. So what I'd be doing is I'd go back to that memory of being about 5. I'd get into a sensory experience of being in my room
Right?
and hearing those voices through the walls.
Yeah.
and I'd look at what did my 5-year-old mind want
Right.
from
I think
dad,
it wanted safety and security and
from mom.
comfort. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be a worksheet on carry. I want safety and security.
Okay.
But if you did a worksheet on mom in that circumstance, what would it be?
Right.
See, I want her to use a caring voice with dad.
Right.
If you did a worksheet on dad in that situation, it might be I want dad to be a big enough man to really just be able to take it from mom.
Right.
If you did a worksheet on your parents, I want my parents to be loving and gentle with each other, caring with each other. Each of those worksheets would take you to a different place in your own unconscious dynamic. And
Interesting.
then looking at what that uncovers, what's the next worksheet?
Right.
Then another way to approach it might be by using a mind shifter.
Right.
And so a mind shifter that I would offer would be it was always sweet and wonderful. You got a pen handy?
Yeah. Oh, let me dig around here a second. We're not big on pens in this house. I thought I had one right here, but I don't know if I do. Do you have a pen, babe? Really easy? Um, yeah, I'm going to listen and Maddox grabbing a pen for me. My dad had World War II PTSD, I'm sure, and he, as a kid with Lebanese parents, was made to like kneel on rocks as a child. So, I just look back into my generations and go, that was how they punished. They had 5 sons, and they punished them just for walking on the grass. They had to kneel on dry garbanzos or rocks, and so I just think the stress that was caught up in these generational things. But
So
anyway,
that
go
would
ahead.
be
I have a pen.
yeah, that would be a situation where you could do a worksheet as though you were your dad,
Okay.
tapping in, like ask his permission energetically if you can do some work in his stead and do the worksheet as though, your name is, you put your dad's name in there, who am love, feel,
Well,
what went on for him as he's being forced to, over walking in the grass, kneel on dried garbanzo beans.
yeah.
Whew.
Yep. And flying wounded out of battle in World War II, I think was really devastating for him also,
Yeah.
and so I can do it on that.
And you might also do worksheets as yourself, listening to those memories being shared with you.
Yes.
How did you become aware of him being forced to kneel on rocks or dried garbanzo beans? How did you learn about him flying out of battle wounded?
Okay.
And go back to those moments and do the worksheet in that situation.
Cool. Okay.
And then
And then
mind
my
shifter,
mom, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say, my mom was kind of immature, like she didn't really want to have kids when she had us, and he was 5 years older than her, so she had kids. And then I don't know why she just would have these kind of screaming fits. I really don't have any idea, except I know that that was her meltdown point. It had to
Well,
be
is it
something that came from her power person, right?
most likely, yeah. Was it her mother you said that used to go to the Battle
I
Creek
think it was her
Sanitarium?
grandmother. Her parents were divorced when she was 3, and I think her mother took her to live with her mother's parents, who were kind of an older couple in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He was a university professor. She was like one of the first women that went to college in her age group and became a valedictorian of her class. So she grew up with these sort of old country German Jewish grandparents, non-religious,
Hmm.
and didn't really have to do much, was kind of a spoiled a little bit, and then her and that it was that grandmother who would have meltdowns once a year. And then my
Good
grandma,
chance that was her power person then.
that's what
The
I'm
screaming
thinking.
fits were probably what put Grandma in the sanitarium.
That- That's what I'm thinking. And and so I would do maybe put myself and put my mom as the do a worksheet for my mom. I mean, my parents are both passed on, so
Right.
um,
Yeah, you could do a worksheet as mom. Again, you could do a worksheet as yourself listening to that story. What did it
okay,
feel like to learn that your grandmother ended up in a mental institution over
right. And
her
then
behaviors?
that great grandmother had, I think it was Seventh Day Adventist sanitarium. I think it was
Right.
not a real serious mental
Okay.
institution, but it was a
Okay.
sanitarium. It was a
So
rec
that would have
home.
been probably John Kellogg,
Probably, yeah.
probably Kellogg Sanitarium. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Interesting.
that grandma had 2 daughters and a son. One daughter was pretty stable, that was my grandma, my mom's mom, and then her
Just lost you.
phone's sleeping. Okay, here I am. That,
Okay, you're back.
so my grandma's sister had all the years I knew her, she had shock therapy once a year for depression and cried a lot and, was pretty kinda debilitated. So, you know I guess I'd like to just explore all of those in the best way I can in order to unravel some of those stories. That's really good. I like what you said about going to how that story made me feel and begin
Well,
clearing it.
of course, one of the things you're going to want to do as you do that is you're going to want to heal the inclination of your mind to go into denial because those stories never made you feel anything,
Okay.
but they showed you what feelings were in you.
Okay.
Remember our definition of denial. When I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's inside of me. So
Right.
I've got feelings going on inside of me. And when I speak about how that made me feel, I've now told my mind that it has to tell me a lie about my feelings and that out there caused it. Rather than investigating that when this happened, the feelings that came up in me, what was going on in me, now I get to own and my mind gets to tell me the truth. Otherwise, my mind has to fabricate how it was about something outside of me.
Okay. Right.
Because whenever I go into denial, whenever I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I literally have to dissociate from the truth. In other words, I now create an unnatural condition called an unconscious mind, and my mind has to hallucinate a story to fill in the blank.
Right. So
So
all
just
these
really observing and watching your mind when it wants to go into denial is a big key, and then bringing it back to, oh, yeah, that's when I was a kid, what came up for me when, rather than how that made me feel, will change everything the mind tells you.
Okay. Because those constructs, those thought patterns, those emotional patterns are all inside of me, even if they did come from my generations.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I can only get the truth out of my mind when I tell my mind the truth and I'm willing to see the truth. And I can't heal with anything but the truth. I can, you know, move the deck chairs around on the Titanic by dealing with a lie my mind tells me. Oh, they made me so enraged. And, I can make up a new story. There's actually a body of work out there will say, well, can you really know that that story was true, that happened? Well, maybe you can't. Therefore, so you can trick your mind into rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic, but you still haven't dealt with the underlying dynamic that needs to be cleaned up.
So
It's
the
not about
best
convincing
way,
yourself that maybe you were in error about your conclusion. It's about touching into what's the real underlying unconscious energy and cleaning it up.
and so the best way to do that, to bring it back to self,
And
and
every tool we've got, all of the above.
okay, you were going to give me a mind shifter. Do
Yes.
you, can you,
So, so the mind shifter I would offer would be it was safe, sweet, and wonderful to listen to my parents rage at each other when I was a child.
Okay.
Now, what's your mind say to that?
Wow.
Bullshit, right? Okay. So
Right.
now we know we got the right mind shifter. So as you sit and take a couple hours with that, then that that will through resonance show you everything in your mind that you've hidden from yourself about what happened when that
Right.
occurred.
Okay. Cool.
You know,
And
it's
then
interesting that your brother brought up that memory as well. There may
it
be
is.
some things to uncover there,
Yeah. Because we were in different rooms. I had two brothers in one room and me in another room, but my parents were in some other part of the house raging
right?
at each other. And it was a unpleasant sound for sure.
Yeah.
And whatever that meant at the time. And there wasn't
Well,
anybody to
that's what you
come and
want
save us.
uncover. What did it mean at the time? Gee,
Right.
maybe my family is over. That's a possibility of what goes through a child's mind at 5.
Hmm.
Maybe my parents are going to kill each other. Maybe my parents are going to leave, divorce. Who knows what the variations on the theme are. And what happens is we tend to hold those things at an unconscious level because they're perhaps too painful and too difficult to look at. But as long as they're at an unconscious level, then they distort everything output from my mind about relationship.
Right. Yeah, I now that we're just talking about it, I remember my mom screaming at my dad, "I'm going to divorce you" at some point. But, you know, everything was normal by the daytime.
Yeah.
Life just as usual. But
Well, and so that what I've run into with that sort of a response is so now when we all sat down at the breakfast table, everybody had to pretend and everybody had to lie about what happened the night before. We could never be
right,
honest with what was really going on in the family.
right,
So that opens another whole can of worms.
right,
If the conclusion of the child was it's not safe to tell the truth in my family system, then what happens when I'm in relationship with the people in my family today? If that's an unconscious dynamic from the age of 5,
right.
truth is going to be hard to come up with. Living in the
Yeah,
truth is going to be difficult, and the only thing that will ever bring us healing and wholeness is truth.
right. Yeah, that's been a big lesson of mine to learn to tell the truth in relationships. It's been a big, very journey that I've been very aware of. And thankfully, I have a partner who's, we're both, part of our work together is to tell the truth to each other
Yeah.
in a kind way. And
So a good mind shifter can be it's safe and healing to always tell the truth quickly. And then for anybody who's listening that's not aware of the mind shifter tool, it's a tool that's meant to be a written tool where you take a piece of paper, you divide the page in two that you can write the mind shifter on. You write the mind shifter on the left hand side of the page. Then you write everything that comes up in your mind on the right hand side of the page. And so that's the idea of the mind shifter. And you spend the more uh, important the situation, the more intense the response is, the more time you want to spend. You might spend 2, 3, 4 hours with that mind shifter, and you write it, and you write it, you write it, and you write everything that comes up. Gee, it was safe, sweet, and wonderful to hear all that. Well, that's crazy. Who are you trying to kid? That was terrible. And just let your mind then go into free association. Let everything flow that's there. And because the mind works by resonance, every time you write the mind shifter, that resonates or fires the next level of the unconscious. And it's kind of like turning the amplitude up. There are 3 levels of function of the mind. There's conscious, what I'm aware of at the moment. Don't think about the color of your car and what happens. Something about the color of your car becomes conscious. A moment ago, that information was subconscious. What's the key issue in your life that you're really not wanting to look at and face? Breath is held, and that stuff stays at the unconscious level. So the mind works by resonance. And so the idea of a mind shifter is to resonate turn the volume up, write it until you get down to the very root of what's going on.
Right. Very good. Great explanation. So if we can go back for a moment to these kind of memories I have of stories I was told about my grandparents, my great grandparents on both sides of the family. I was told about my dad's mom that she was hit as a child and she sort of ran away from home and married my grandpa. Um, but it's all secondhand knowledge. But again, to come back to that, these things are inside of self and a process to clear those. So would I be putting that grandparent in the number one position in the worksheet, or put myself and what I remember being told,
All of
or
the above. Yeah, I
all of
do it
the,
from every angle.
okay,
Yeah, and every angle will yield up different fruit.
okay, okay. Well, great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for the questions. I'm just delighted to be on your team and definitely holding the space for every layer that you're ready to open and move forward. This at this particular time with the trauma going on in the earth, these
Mm,
power person
yes,
dynamics really, we need to have
yes,
a critical mass of people who are willing to break through them in order to create a breakthrough on a planet-wide scale.
agreed. Oh, very good. And I really like. I found the pseudo solutions too that you were reading earlier so revealing. Like, oh yeah, we have our ways of patching things up and thinking we're going to make it okay, but we're really not. And to
Yeah,
recognize those pseudo solutions when they come up, it's really,
it's a big key. Yeah.
it is very big.
Yeah, it's like,
Well,
thank you, mind. I appreciate that, but I've got some work I'm going to do around this instead.
that's right. All
Because the
right.
pseudo solutions will always lead to more trauma.
Interesting. Yes, 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 they will. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
if only I were good enough, and then I affirm, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, and there's an underlying dynamic that in me that's out of harmony with truth. But because I have to pretend that I'm good enough, I keep that hidden. And now every time my mind formulates a construct about myself, it's got this lie in it. How can I
Right,
possibly function out of that? So, each of the pseudo solutions needs to be dismantled and
right.
to teach the mind to go to the default of breathe, smile, cancel the goal.
And love, center and love.
Yep,
Yeah, I'm thinking of that. The childhood thing that I have of, well, if I'm just quiet and I don't say anything, I won't ruffle the feathers of these upset parents.
right.
And I think that's been you know, and so that's been my pseudo solution my whole life is
Mm.
just don't. Uh,
So a good mind shifter to work with there might be, it's safe and healing for me to ruffle the feathers of my upset parents. Give yourself permission
hmm.
and see what, as a child, you used to avoid ruffling the feathers, because that also probably comes into the way you treat yourself and you treat the people around you, rather
Right,
than with truth, with whatever your solution, and it's when we're five, there's a certain way of cycling information and a certain way of perceiving that, just oftentimes bears no resemblance whatsoever to truth.
right,
And if we keep using that, then our lives just don't ever really approach the truth.
right. And do you think would that also relate to that element in me of blockage of truth?
That's the core of it. Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
What
that makes
what
a lot
what
of sense.
happens is that perception constructs a world, literally a whole world, the world we think is outside of us, The
Right.
picture world we think we see is constructed by the brain. And if there is a flaw in it, then its construct is a lie. We've only got 9 spaces, 9 bits of data out of 10,000 brain cells firing. We've only got 9 spaces. And once those 9 spaces are filled with a lie, and we call our lie the truth. Well, the truth is I have to do this in order to survive. When we call that lie the truth, all of a sudden now we've made ourselves impervious to truth. There's no space for the truth to show up. It just bounces off of us. And when you cancel the goal and collapse that which is filling the 9 bit space, there's room for truth to show up. Oh, there it is. Aha. The big aha insight comes.
Right.
But as long as we're calling a lie the truth, we're now living in blockage of truth.
Very good.
All right, young lady.
All right. Thanks so much,
Lots of love
Michael.
and blessings. All righty.
Hi to
Take care.
Jeanie. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thanks for being quizzical and doing your work. And Melissa has a thought for us. Another question came up. All my worksheets have been basically over specific events. Can you do a blanket worksheet? Not to be lazy, okay. But like with my childhood, one of my relationships over years of abuse in a variety of ways, I'm sure I don't even remember, nor do I feel I'm stressing over it. So the fact, Melissa, that you put the word stress in there, I'm not stressing over it, would say that there's probably some stress that's coming into your life that you're not aware of. And to say I have no ill feelings, if everything was cool with them, then you say, yeah, and even though there was some abuse, everything's cool with them. But the fact that you say, I don't have any ill feelings, there are probably still some unconscious ill feelings that you're going to want to use worksheets specifically to go to those specifics. So, pardon me. Excuse me, I just took a sip of water and went down the wrong road. Whoa, excuse me. So I would suggest that you do some specific worksheets around that relationship. Let yourself uncover those things that are not in recall, because the body never forgets. Carbon-based memory holds every frequency that's ever been put in it. And it holds it in the context in which it was put into the mind until you bring it back to the surface. And I think there's a book title that comes to mind that somebody wrote. I haven't read it, but I heard it was pretty good. It's called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And to let yourself go back and be with those things and bring them forward in the presence of love. It is that active presence of love that will cause forgiveness to occur, that will cause the dissolution of the unresolved trauma that's there. And my offering, if I were, let's say, going to Chicago today, I wouldn't say to you, I'm not going to California, I'm going to Chicago, unless there was some thought about going to California. We don't use words unless they tie into what's going on in the mind. And so I'd look at, what kind of issues there are still in that resolved aspects of that relationship. So holding the space, Carol Truman, pardon me. Thanks, Don, for the name of that book. And delighted that you've joined us. Glad you're here and holding the space for you, Melissa, that whatever, even the tiniest little stresses or ill feelings that need to be released, that you're freed from them and let your tissue structure be alleviated of those burdens. And we hold the space for everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the conversations. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings. Bye bye.